Good morning. It's the midweek edition of Business Morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu. We'll begin with global oil market update as prices rose in early trade amid signs of improving demand and a drawdown in U.S. crude inventories, but worries over the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic capped gains. Brent crude futures for July delivery were up 23 cents at $34.88 per barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures for July were up 14 cents at $32.10 a barrel. The July contract closed on Tuesday at $31.96, up $1%. The June contract expired on Tuesday at $32.50 a barrel, up 2.1% as the WTI futures market avoided the chaos of last month's May expiry when prices sank below zero. Oil prices have mainly risen during the past 3 weeks, with both benchmarks climbing above $30 for the first time in more than 4 months on Monday, supported by massive output cuts by major oil-producing countries and signs of improving demand. U.S. crude inventories fell by 4.8 million barrels to 521.3 million barrels in the week to May 15. Official data from the Energy Information Administration is due out later today. Asia's gasoline profit margins turned positive on Tuesday for the first in nearly 2 months, giving hope to global oil refiners. But lingering concerns about the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, especially in the United States, which is the world's biggest oil consumer, kept a lid on prices. And the central bank will not support the importation of items that can be produced in Nigeria with forex. That, according to a statement by the Apex Bank, the CBN will not support the importation of items that can be produced in Nigeria because the bank could not spend its foreign exchange reserves on what would not boost the economy and generate jobs for Nigerians. As Nigeria continued the process of full reopening of the economy, the Central Bank Governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, has urged the industrial conglomerates to support efforts aimed at growing the economy and returning it to its glory days. Emefiele, during a virtual meeting with chief executive officers of conglomerates in Nigeria, said in line with the federal government's desire, it was determined to return the Nigerian economy to the period when the manufacturing and agricultural sectors formed the mainstay of the economy. The CBN governor, while acknowledging the challenge of low oil prices to major economies of the world, expressed confidence that the price of crude would not remain at low levels for a long period. Well, the House of Representatives last week called for the review or outright cancellation of latest China loans to Nigeria on the principle of force majeure. The House is also set to look into all extant China-Nigeria's loan agreements since 2000 with a view to ascertaining their viability, regularizing and renegotiating them. Now, China is at the fore of Africa's debt drive, making the Asian nation Africa's largest bilateral creditor, as it has given the continent loan worth about $152 billion in 18 years. That's between 2000 and 2018. To avoid unnecessary requests for debt write-offs, defaults, and reliefs, the Chinese government had limited its African loans to infrastructural projects executed by Chinese-owned companies, and in most cases with Chinese labor. With such huge load, a lot of critics are concerned over how feasible it will be for African nations to refund the credit with the advent of the coronavirus. An example is the Belt and Road Initiative. Joining me now to put all of these into perspective is a senior lecturer and the Director, Center for Infrastructure, Policy, Regulation and Advancement at the Lagos Business School, Dr. Bongo Adi. Good morning, Dr. Adi. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chimeze. Thanks for having me.
So, our total external debt as at 2019, December, was $27.7 billion. Now, the Chinese component is about $3.2 billion. This is less than 10%. Is this really something to worry about?
Well, let's get the data clear first. I think as it stands now, our total debt should be about $31 billion. And if we add the new concessionary loans coming from IMF and other development finance institutions, we should be looking at anything about $36 billion. Now, regarding Chinese loans, I think the Chinese Exim Bank since 2002 seems to have advanced a total of about $6.5 billion to Nigeria. So that's quite significant. So, well, if you say just 10% of our total debt, and then asking whether it is something for us to worry about, I think we have to look at the total debts, and our capacity to repay, because it's not just to China, but to all our various creditors. So when we look at it, the independent revenue, debt to independent revenue is about 95% as it stands now, 96% actually. So that has passed the critical threshold. What it means is that we lack the ability, we don't have the headroom anymore to repay, because our independent revenue is already being stretched, strangulated by the enormous debt that is hanging over the federal government as it stands now. So increasing that with Chinese loan, it's something that we really need to be concerned about. Why is that so? Because we have to look at the history of Chinese loan, not just in Nigeria, but in Africa, in the African continent, and in the entire developing world. That has come up in the past 3 years, starting from 2017 and 2018. I know that the United States has taken up China on this, writing to the U.S. representatives at a point, wrote to the president to actually, intervene in what they call Chinese debt trap, diplomacy. So they're using finance as a weapon in many developing countries. So out of 63 countries that has Chinese host the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative projects, about 20 of them had already gone under distress, and 8 were, about to lose their sovereign debt sustainability if they should take any further loan. So if that were to be a good guide, it means that we need to really be careful when we're engaging with the Chinese, borrowing from the Chinese.
Now, are you concerned that Nigeria can actually find itself in the same situation with perhaps Zambia, where the Chinese government had to, take over some government assets?
That is actually, if history were to be a guide, of course, all that we have right now is data. So we have to look at what has happened to other countries. It's not just Zambia. In Africa, we have Kenya. We have the Lamu port in Kenya that is about to fall into the Chinese hands. We know about also Djibouti is a very small African country. Okay, more than 85% of their debt, exposure is to the Chinese. And we know that Djibouti occupies a very strategic anchor point in Africa in terms of shipping. So the Chinese, in order not to leave anybody in any doubt regarding their intentions, have established a military base there. So we have to put that into consideration. And then, of course, in Sri Lanka, we know what happened to the Hambantota International Airport. They had to be leased to the Chinese for 99 years when the government found themselves in default of Chinese increasing Chinese loan. They used to build that infrastructure. So we've seen this repeating cycle all over the world, where the Chinese will advance loans without asking questions, and then these nations not critically censoring or scrutinizing the Chinese intentions and all of that, kept on wrapping up those loans until they find themselves in default. And then what normally happens, the Chinese will begin to take possession, repossess strategic infrastructure assets. So that is what some people call Chinese, chopstick imperialism. So we've seen that, and then so many researchers are also covering that. We know about George Aite, the Ghanaian who won the H.L. Mencken Prize in 2003 for his work. So he has actually looked extensively at Chinese engagement in Africa and in the rest of the world. And the experience is not just pleasant.
Okay, so what would you make of the move by the House of Representatives calling for a review or possibly debt relief? Now, going by what you have said and looking at the fact that the Chinese are, have developed this strategy of tying their loans to projects, how feasible will that now be?
Okay, that is a step. Again, you can see that resonates with what I've already said about China and their interest in key infrastructure or key strategic infrastructure assets in many emerging countries. So if they are tying their loans to projects, of course, that immediately leaves nobody in any doubt or leaves anybody in any doubt regarding their intention. So if you are not able to repay, they take possession of that infrastructure asset. So that becomes their collateral. So you can see that they have made it clear. So of course, I think, first of all, it is not bad to borrow. And moreover, the House, saying that we should declare force majeure and all of that in order to exonerate ourselves from repayment, we need to understand that COVID-19 is a temporary thing, whether we like it or not. No matter what, it will still come to pass someday. And then we'll find ourselves in a situation where we will need to borrow money. Okay, so if we act, based on this to declare force majeure and then default on our loan, so that wouldn't actually be a good thing to do looking at the future. So my thinking is that we have to introduce accountability, transparency, and responsibility in our engagement with the Chinese, especially when it comes to loan. We need the loans, definitely, but then we do not have the right institutional structures to guarantee that when those loans are taken, that they will be judiciously utilized and that we can repay them. But there are so many solutions to all of this, which I think we need to be looking at.
Now, so far, the Abuja-Kaduna Rail and a couple of others have been successful, but government appears to have suspended construction works on the Lagos-Ibadan standard gauge rail project for about 2 months now due to COVID-19. Now, what impact do you see this having on Nigeria's debt to China?
Well, when you say that the Abuja-Kaduna rail has been successful, it depends on how you want to qualify that success. Yes, success in the sense that it has been completed, executed, all right. But then when we look at the economics of that, questions have been asked. I know that I've heard the Minister for Transport in one forum, talking about how government subsidizes almost 60% of that. So now that, the cry all over is for government to remove subsidies. So do you think that that project will still be sustainable if those subsidies are removed? And if that were the case, will we be able to repay those debts that we use in those constructions? So what is the impact of all of this? We need to be careful. That's all I'm saying. Accountability, responsibility, transparency. But beyond that, before taking any loan, I think there are so many options. Even PPP, I wouldn't be talking about PPP because even the World Bank has beginning to change its stand on PPP. They're now talking about what they call blended finance. Blended finance is a strategic tool where you bring in development finance with some philanthropic funds in order to activate private capital into infrastructure development. I think there are some solutions that we need to be looking at so that we will know that we are doing the right thing and not jeopardizing our sovereignty.
All right, Dr. Bongo, let's look at the Belt and Road Initiative. The hype around it, it seems to have subsided. What do you think is responsible?
Well, countries are still battling with COVID-19. So we need to get ourselves out of the health pandemic that we find the entire world has been thrown into before we can talk about other things. And moreover, why nobody's talking about it, Belt and Road Initiative, is not because people have learned to live with it. It's just because even China is also under stress. I listened to the Chinese premier the other day during the World Health Assembly, making a speech because some people said he has been forced to actually address the world. So, and then characteristically of China, so he made another commitment of $2 billion to support, so throwing money at all these things. When China is being called out, they have this, practice of bringing out money. So I think they are now facing that challenge of responding to so many questions that I imagine emanating from different parts of the world on the COVID-19, its management, right from Wuhan in China. So I think at the end of the day, when we are through with this, people will still be asking questions about the Belt and Road Initiative. Like I said earlier, 63 of the countries, there are 63 countries now housing the Belt and Road Initiatives. 23 of them are in financial distress. They are no longer able to repay those debts. So if that were to be a guide, then you can see that the Belt and Road Initiative isn't actually to the interests of emerging economies.
Now, let's look at it critically. The total outlay for the Belt and Road Initiative was $1 trillion. Is this not ambitious?
Please come again.
The total outlay for the Belt and Road Initiative was $1 trillion. Is this not ambitious?
You mean ambitious from the side of the Chinese?
I mean, yeah, from both sides. I mean, that amount of money, investing it.
Yeah, so you need to understand what the Chinese intention is. So it's not just don't look at the size of the loan. You have to look at the intention behind the loan. So what is the Chinese strategic imperative? So they are looking at a new foreign policy. So we are looking at a world where China is beginning to emerge as a global power. So in the past, we've had a more or less unipolar world dominated by the Pax Americana. So the Chinese have seen themselves, as not an emerging country, but their GDP will, in the next few years, surpass that of the United States. It's the second largest economy in the world. And in terms of military power, they're also coming up, challenging the established order. So one of the ways, because you see, the Chinese became the manufacturing hub for the whole world. Okay, so and as a result, they needed to the logistics to bring in raw materials, to bring in inputs for their production, and also exporting, all the finished products. So they needed to protect those routes. So protection of routes. When you become an economic power, the next thing is that you have to become a political power. So it is important for them to protect those routes. So the $1 trillion of the Belt and Road Initiative is not just loans being given out to countries, but it is part of the Chinese strategy to protect their dominance of the global economy right now.
Now, overall, what's your view on Nigeria's debt sustainability?
As I said, our debt is high. Independent government revenue available to service the loans runs at 96%. So, meaning that for every dollar, 96, for every naira, 96 kobo is used in debt service. So what is left is nothing. So that is a very critical situation. It's a very precarious situation for any country to be in. So should we, because of that, stop borrowing money? Yes, there are, like I said, we have very smart people in Nigeria. We have very smart experts, even within government, who know how to structure good deals. Okay, so what is required is, like I keep saying, accountability, responsibility, transparency. We have to swerve away quickly from this whole thing about public funded infrastructure. So we do not need to, because government has displayed its incapacity and incompetence in managing projects and making them work and economically viable. So there are some other solutions that we need to explore. I've talked about the blended finance. There are so many strong structural systems, structural mechanisms that we could deploy to ensure that we get the loans in such a way that they are put into good projects that are able to repay the loans by themselves.
Right, accountability. That's where we will leave this conversation for now, Dr. Adi. Dr. Bongo Adi is the Director, Center for Infrastructure, Policy, Regulation and Advancement at the Lagos Business School. Thank you for your time, Dr. Adi.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, have you heard about the cannabis oil and its potentials? That's what we'll be talking about after the break. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned. Now, the popularity of medical marijuana is soaring. And among the numerous products consumers are seeking is the CBD, or what they call cannabis oil. There are claims that CBD oils can cure a lot of ailment, even cancer, but research doesn't suggest that cannabis oil should take the place of conventional medication. Simply put, cannabis oil is the concentrate liquid extract of the marijuana plant, Cannabis sativa. Now, according to a new study, the worldwide market for CBD oil is expected to grow at roughly 44.1% over the next 5 years and will reach $2,420 million in 2026 from $270 million in 2020. Now, some African countries like Zimbabwe, Lesotho, and Malawi have legalized the production and export of this commodity. Here in Nigeria, cannabis is grown widely across the country, and despite being an illegal commodity in Nigeria, an estimated 20.8 million people consume cannabis every year, in a market estimated at $15.3 billion. And so with oil drying up and government looking for an alternative source of revenue, could production and export of cannabis be another source of revenue for the country? I'm being joined by the CEO of CBD Oil Nigeria, Lamia Momo, and of course, the Managing Director, Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Ruwani, who joins us via Skype. Thank you, Lamia, for joining us. And of course, thank you, Mr. Ruwani, for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Lamia, I'll start with you. Narcotics generally is a very negative, a very negative term in both moral, legal, and of course, financial terms. Now, CBD oil is made of cannabis, which is narcotic. Why are you pushing this agenda for cannabis oil? And why at this time?
Thank you for having me first. There's a report by Bloomberg that says that the global cannabis industry is worth a staggering I think it's about $150 billion. Now, before we go on to talk about why I want cannabis legalized, I would like to define what cannabis is, because there's that misconception that you've just mentioned around cannabis, and it has a very, it has a stigma. Now, cannabis goes by a number of names: weed, hemp, marijuana, kush, ganja, pot, and in Nigeria we call it Igbo. However, cannabis is a plant. It's an agricultural crop that has two children, marijuana and hemp. Marijuana has a content in it called tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the substance that is responsible for the high and the intoxication that people feel when they take it. Hemp, on the other hand, doesn't have that. However, both marijuana and hemp have tremendous health benefits that cannot be ignored. For instance, marijuana there was a man called Rick Simpson. I'm going to tell you a little story. There's a man called Rick Simpson who had this very rare cancer. And he had tried all sorts of orthodox medicine, and it wasn't working. So he read somewhere in one of the journals that marijuana was very good for mice. It was able to cure cancer in mice. So he went and he made some, because they didn't give him access or authority to get medical marijuana. So he was growing the cannabis plant in his home. And he took it, and he realized that he got well. So he used this same oil. It's now called Rick Simpson oil. He used this same oil to help address over 5,000 different cases, cancer cases, across the world. Now, marijuana is very good for its health benefits. There's another landmark case in London. There's this little boy, his name is Billy Caldwell. He's 12 years old. And he used to suffer from seizures. He used to have about 100 seizures a day. So his mom went looking for a cure for him. And she went to America, got medical marijuana, and she used to give it to her son, and it was making him better. Now, one day she was coming from America, and the UK customs stopped her. And they seized the medical marijuana. After a while, her son went into a fit. There was nothing that could help him. He was in the hospital. And if you look at the pictures, you'll see all the tubes coming out from different parts of his body. So he was just in the hospital, almost dead. So the mom went to petition the UK Home Office, and she told them that, look, this medical marijuana is the only thing that can help her son. Now, her son is in hospital. If anything happens to him, she's going to hold them responsible. So eventually, they released the medical marijuana to her. She went to the hospital, gave it to her son was better. So they decided to monitor him. And they monitored him for 300 days. And someone that used to have seizures, 100 seizures every single day, went to having 0 throughout the 300-day period. Because of that landmark case alone, cannabis was legalized in the UK in 2008. And there's so many other cases like that all over America. Quickly, the drug companies took advantage of that and now decided to make an extract from cannabis medicine called Epidiolex. That's the first FDA authorized medicine in the world. So they have that. Apart from that, marijuana is used for a host, numerous health benefits.
Yeah, irrespective of these benefits of the commodity, now medical experts, most medical experts are still, hesitant about the CBD. Why?
No, they're hesitant about the marijuana. CBD, and I'm here to say that I don't take marijuana. I just need to buttress that point. I don't take that's not the reason why I want it. That's not the reason why I'm advocating for it to be legalized. But I take something called CBD. And CBD is a derivative from hemp. Hemp will not does not give that psychoactive effect. It's not there. However, there's so many different products that we use in Nigeria already that are hemp-related. And we're already consuming hemp anyway through hemp seed oil and different, CBD, hemp protein. We use it for our hair. So we already use hemp. Hemp was first sourced for its rich source of amino acid through the seeds. And then they found out that if they break the stalk, the fiber could be used for over 5,000 different hemp-related products. So BMW uses a hemp composite to make their electric cars, the i3. I mean, hemp is used for textiles, it's used for medicine, as I said, CBD oil. I discovered CBD oil because of a health challenge that I had. I was suffering from insomnia for a very long time. And I realized that when I discovered CBD oil, I wasn't even taking it for insomnia. I was taking it for a pain in my foot. So when I discovered the CBD oil, I realized that it was the only product I could take that could help address the insomnia without any negative side effects. And I realized after that, I'm a witness to hundreds of other people that have taken the Sterling Herbal CBD oil, that brand, and it has helped address numerous health ailments. Doctors might not agree, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's all around us. There's a massive cannabis boom right now. And it's in the interest of our government to legalize cannabis because it will be a benefit on every single sector of the economy, from agriculture and the different, the different supply chains.
Right. At this point, I would want to bring in Mr. Rwanina to buttress or perhaps talk more about what you've just said. Mr. Rwanina, I'm sure you heard Lamia. Well, the CBD oil is gotten from cannabis, and here in Nigeria, this is mainly grown in the South region. Now, how much of cannabis does Nigeria grow? And considering its medical potentials, what potential does the industry have to end the country foreign exchange, particularly now we are seriously talking about diversifying the economy? And of course, Lamia here is advocating for legalization of this product.
Thank you. Good morning, Chimeze. I listened to Lamia, and I think she's quite eloquent and convincing in her arguments. But the reality is that the pressure to legalize marijuana has been driven in the past by people like Peter Tosh, and the stigma of marijuana, as you can see from the slides, highlighted by the movie Scarface and The Godfather. So at times there's a correlation between the narcotic effect, the addictiveness, and the fact that it's prohibited, which creates a premium. And this thing also, it leads to, it's not violence-free. So you can see people like Noriega and, in Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Pablo Escobar and all that. So that is the truth. However, there's also the fact that necessity is the mother of invention. The legalized marijuana market, the legal marijuana market, is small compared to the total marijuana market. So it is true that the illegal marijuana market, which is sold for leisure and other undesirable consequences, is quite bigger than that one. But the legal marijuana market, which is used for medical, for pain management, and for mental disorders and that is where I think legalizing in Nigeria will help in terms of diversifying our exports. The total market size is estimated to get to about $73 billion in the year 2027. The structure of the market is oligopolistic. There are few suppliers and many buyers. And it is used for legitimate and legal reasons. And when you take that, if we get 10% of that or 20% of that market, we'll be talking about almost $14 billion if we can get 20% of that market. Don't forget, right now, we are the 4th largest producer of cocoa. And if you look at our profile of our exports and receipts, oil is bringing in about 25.5, maybe because the price of oil has gone up. It's gone up to about $30 billion this year. Diaspora remittances is giving us about $23 billion. And that is going to reduce because some of our people are going to be laid off in the high unemployment. Then after that comes LNG and cocoa. So if you have legalized marijuana coming in at 20% of that, and we get about $14 billion, then it will actually help diversify, one, our revenue base, and two, it will also create jobs. But how do you manage it in such a way that the unintended consequences, the addictiveness and the other things that I talked about, that when you're producing it, some of your people in this country do not start to consume it for the wrong reasons? Do we have the law enforcement? Do we have the infrastructure, institutional infrastructure, to manage it so that it doesn't get out of hand? And so I think that is one point. The second point is that if you look at the history of prohibition in the world, the key areas of prohibition in the past, in the 20s, 30s, whiskey prohibition under Tammany Hall and all of that produced the likes of Al Capone, Charlie Lucky Luciano in New York, Al Capone in Chicago, where there was a lot of violence. Then the gambling prohibition until it was legalized in Nevada, Then you have the narcotics itself, which is part of the mafia and the Cosa Nostra secret and all that. So you had whiskey prohibition, gambling prohibition, narcotics prohibition, prostitution prohibition, and loan sharking. Every time you prohibit something, you increase the premium because people become desperate. These products are usually inelastic. People want it and they want it badly. They will do anything to get it fixed. So how do you manage this? And you see what has happened is that from the time whiskey was now legitimized, the level of crime and the mafia activities in the United States and Sicily actually declined sharply. That is not to say that then you had other mobs, the Russian mob, the Cuban mob, and all of that coming to take over. But having said that, for Nigeria, if we participate only in the legitimate cannabis export market, we stand to benefit significantly, and that will also help in terms of minimizing our vulnerability to external shocks, build up things, but we cannot jump into it without understanding what the consequences are. If you start producing it in large scale, how do you protect and prevent your kids from doing this? So we had the same problem with cigarettes, whiskey,
Mr. Irwani, let me come in here. When the governor of Ondo State, Rotimi Akeredolu, first indicated that the state may explore cannabis cultivation for medicinal purposes in controlled plantations in the state, it raised a lot of eyebrows because, of course, this is not a legalized commodity. But looking at some African countries that have legalized this and are exporting it, are there lessons to be learned from them in terms of regulation or managing the legalization of this commodity?
Well, I like that question in the sense that when you look at Zimbabwe and Lesotho, which are the two countries you mentioned earlier, they have, in spite of the economic problems of Zimbabwe, which are well documented and known, but they have very advanced institutional frameworks. The ZANU-PF it was a liberation movement turned political party under the iron fist of the late president, Mugabe. And so you find that, does Nigeria have the network and the political and the enforcement capacity to actually ensure that this thing is produced mainly for exports, is produced and kept legitimately so that and prevent addiction? But the other argument, on the other hand, is that, look, people are already consuming this thing. This thing is, you can get it for 1K or 500 naira for a joint out there. So Are we, in trying to enforce the prohibition of narcotics in Nigeria, is it working? Or is it not already a problem? Can't we just take the good with the bad? Since we already have the bad, can we now legitimize it, structure it, and use part of the revenues we earn from it to actually build the infrastructure for enforcement to maintain this? I think, quite frankly, it's something that we cannot afford to ignore at this time. It's an imperative. It's an economic and also a medical imperative for Nigeria at this time.
All right, Lamia, we've heard from Mr. Rwanda, but I'm more interested on the medical aspect of this. Now, the world is scrambling for a cure for COVID-19. Perhaps, would CBD oil be an option to look at?
I make no medical claims, but we stand on testimonials of people that have come back and given, are testified to taking CBD oil and what it does. I will not sit down here and tell you that it is a cure for COVID-19, but I do know that some studies are being carried out in Israel right now to find out if cannabis oil will be a cure for COVID-19. So there are people that are trying to research into that. There's a lot of research going into that right now. So I don't know. I don't want to say things that I'm not sure about. So I don't know if it will cure COVID-19, but I know that it boosts the immune system. So in that aspect, it boosts the immune system, yes. But is it a cure with that in inverted commas? I don't know at this point.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Rwanda, looking at the market share of this commodity or this product, what do you think would be the outlook eventually?
I would say that at this time, because of what's happening, the economy is challenged at this time. Any form of exports, any form of commercialization of an export that can be, will help us, because right now we're having a balance of trade deficit of about almost estimated at about $3 to $5 billion, and it's expected to grow much faster. So we need to do that. So if we, like I said, if we get 10-20% of the market share of this, and we cultivate it commercially and bring in partners and everything, then it's likely that we could grow, and it could boost growth, it could boost employment, and as long as we manage the side effects of not having it distracting our kids, becoming addicted, and increasing domestic crime, because this product, because of its intoxicant effect, intoxication effect, could actually lead to violence, domestic violence and other things. I think this can be managed. So in Jamaica, they had a lot of problems. Some claim it has induced and helped build their music industry. One is not too sure whether it's cause and effect, or it's whether the Jamaican music actually originated from their slave heritage and all of that. But this also enhanced it because they use it to actually calm themselves down. But again, I don't want to go into the argument of whether to legitimize cannabis or marijuana or not, but I'm saying that the legal marijuana market has to be monitored. We've had some countries like Afghanistan where the level of violence in Afghanistan, everything rotates around opium and the poppy flower. We've seen that in Pakistan, the Taliban. And so, Chimizia, I think the issue is that if we can manage all out, then it's something that we should look at. It could actually improve our exports as much as 15 to 20%.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rwanda. Now, let me a quick one before I let you go. Is there something else consumers should know about consuming the CBD oil? Because, I mean, some of the claims here are not substantiated by any research or something.
Well, the World Health Organization said that CBD oil does not give any negative side effects. And they did mention a few elements that it can help with, potentially. They know it helps with cancer, and then it can help with some other things, potentially. But I'd also like to buttress on the fact of what Mr. Rwanda said in relation to legalizing cannabis will help the economy of Nigeria, because first and foremost, it will help the agricultural economy. Every segment of the supply chain from seed to sale will open up doors for opportunities. It will also open up doors for investors to come in, because they say we have the best strains in Nigeria. So it will open up doors for them to come in and invest, bring in their money and their expertise, training our people on cannabis, how to extract it and the processing and all of that, which we don't know. It could also be the catalyst to revitalize the rural communities that are economically marginalized.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Lamia. Well, let's just hope the government may perhaps begin to consider that. Thank you, Lamia Momo, the CEO, CBD Oil Nigeria, and of course, Mr. Bismarck Rwani, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we look at the markets and, of course, an opening call to London. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned. And for updates from the streets of London, here is Juliana Olainka. Good morning, Juliana. I hope you slept very well. Hello, Juliana. Well, if you can hear me, Chancellor Rishi Sunak has warned that Britain is facing a severe recession, the likes of which haven't been seen before, and of course, lasting economic damage from the coronavirus pandemic. The government had been hoping for a V-shaped recovery from the pandemic. How is the government responding to this bleak outlook by Sunak? Well, I guess Juliana is not ready for us. Okay, let's look at the market. We'll start off with yesterday's trading. Temple.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chimese. We were very positive again yesterday, thanks to Dangote Cement. Again, we've seen that the qualification date for the 16 Naira dividend payout by Dangote Cement is just a few days away. You've got 5 more days to go. That's 25th of this month. And that's one of the key reasons why we are seeing an uptick and, of course, demand on the share price, demand for Dangote Cement, as a matter of fact. Of course, if you look at all the banks also, they were very positive yesterday. And all of that translated to a 1.09% gain for the markets yesterday. Again, one of the key reasons why we've been seeing a lot of interest, even demand from offshore investors, and of course the local investors, is because again the crude oil price, which is Nigeria's mainstay, is making a comeback already, and that informs the reason why we're seeing some demand across board at this point in time. That's for those that are wondering why the market is experiencing uptick in spite of the COVID-19 lockdown and all of that has created so much of uncertainty in the market. Yesterday we got this 1.09% translating to 136 billion naira for the equity capitalization of the market, and the volume of transaction was really positive as well. We're up by some 3% yesterday in terms of volume. Access Bank continues to remain atop at this point in time. It looks like investors are done with the beautiful FBN holdings that rattled the market for more than a week. Now attention is on Access Bank, which is up by more than 3% yesterday, contributed more than 81. It contributed some 81 million units of its shares to what we have here as 339 million for a value of over 500 million naira in the market. This brings the value of the percentage rise of the value rather to some 34% yesterday. If the valuation compared to what we did in the previous trading session. Deals was 4,784, and if you look at the sectoral performance, everything was in green. Banking sector, we got Access Bank, we got FBN Holdings, we got Fidelity Bank, we got Unity Bank, all of them ticking upwards yesterday and contributed to this rise that we have on this side of the market, and that was the highest yesterday. Consumer goods side of the market, PZ was also positive. Unilever continues to rise as well, and of course a host of other companies that you have under this space, including some of the brewers, Nigerian breweries. Now, if you look at the industrial goods segment of the market, I mentioned earlier that Dangote Cement was up yesterday by more than 2%. We also have Qtix, which is a company that has indicated interest in buying over AdSwitch. Those contributed to the rise that we saw in this space yesterday. Insurance segment of the market, in spite of the losses that we've seen on Lasaco, which was the top loser yesterday in the market, led some other seven other companies. Yesterday, we got ICO rising yesterday and was able to push up the insurance segment of the market. Of course, we know that there was an insider trading, a positive one, I should say, and of course, that's something that also contributed to this. We know that the CEO of ICO Insurance did some buying yesterday at some 80-something kobo over the share of this particular company, the day before rather. Oil and gas segment of the market was also positive. We know that Keverton, which is somewhat classified under this space also, was up yesterday, was up the most by 10% in the market. And of course, O&O did some gains too yesterday. We got corn oil not moving in terms of energy stocks now. Adova PLC, investors have rested their interest in this, is now back to 19 naira, but far from what investors actually paid to buy these shares last year, June. So if you look at 52 weeks analysis of it, it's still way below that. If you look at 11 PLC, no movement in spite of the plans to buy over, to delist from the stock exchange. MRS, no change, but O&O was actually very, very good. We also have no movement on this side of the market, no interest rather, on all of these other companies. On listed securities end of the market, there was no change. This was unchanged. We got 555 billion naira in terms of what we got for the capitalization. Now, in terms of volume, we got 16,200. 15,000 out of this 16,200 was exchanged on the shares of NDEP, that's Niger Delta Exploration Production Company, one of the highly priced stocks on that side of the market. If you look at CSCS, which also experienced some activities yesterday, it represented the remaining of 1,200 units of shares traded here. So you put together, it comes to 16,200, and of course, all that was in 3 deals, a couple of deals to one of them. Now, for the fixed income side of the market, let's look at what we got here. Investors continue to give cold shoulder to this side of things. Offers are reducing on daily basis, but basically, a few demands we saw yesterday was at the mid-end of things. If you look at the 27th of April 2023 paper, that was one of the key areas that investors indicated interest yesterday, and that represented the 108 naira that we have at this end of the market. Well, I understand we have Mr. Abdulrashid Momo, who is the stockbroker and, of course, chief dealer with the TRW stockbrokers, joining us right now. Mr. Momo, thank you for joining us on the program.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
So let's talk about equities. We know that lately one of the key drivers for interest in the market has been the crude oil price, which is Nigeria's mainstay, and of course that has been driving up performance. But for how long do you think these bullish sentiments will continue in the market, on equities specifically?
Well, as I've always said, we normally deal mostly in technicals. Most of the information are actually fed from the data. The market is still looking healthy, but we expect to see some profit takings because there are some stocks that they've been hitting some certain resistant levels, like Bennett, 16 naira, GTB are within some resistant levels. Even the index, that's the NSE 30 index, the NSE index, they are hitting. They're going to hit some resistant levels very soon. So within this period, we expect to see some profit taking. But as I've said before, the month of May is always one of the best months in terms of bull trends before we enter the month of June, where stocks we'll start seeing lower highs and lows. But for now, the market still looks healthy. Our outlook for the index is still around the 26,000 points.
That's some historical analysis of the market, of the price movements in the equity space there. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdulrashid Momo, Chief Dealer with TRW Stockbrokers. All right, Chimeze, back to you.
Thank you, Tempo. Well, let's move straight now to London. Juliana Olanka is ready to talk to us. Juliana, Chancellor Rishi Sunak has warned that Britain is facing a severe recession, the likes of which haven't been seen before, and lasting economic damage from the coronavirus pandemic. The government had been hoping for a V-shaped recovery from the pandemic. How is the government responding to this bleak outlook by Sunak?
Good morning, Chimeze. Apologies for before. I'm not sure what you have or haven't heard. But just to repeat what I was saying, yes, it seems as if the economic recovery from Britain may take longer than expected. The government can only do so much. And so far, they've spent about 4.5% of GDP, £100 billion. Most of it has gone to this furlough scheme. So the government are paying wages. of 10 million people. The Treasury have just released that number today. We had thought it was between 7 and 8 million, but it's 10 million. I believe Chancellor Rishi Sunak yesterday was speaking off of the back of that labour market report, the details that show that over 2 million people are receiving income support benefits here in the UK. It was a month-on-month increase of over 800,000. And now one of the worrying issues is that August the 1st, when the government, although they will be extending the furlough scheme, they have said that they do want employers to assist them with the furlough scheme. They haven't said by how much. At the moment, the government are paying 80%. They could be paying 50%. But will employers be able to do that? We do know that some of the big companies like British Airways and OVO Energy are already furloughing thousands of their staff, but they've also said that they will be making redundancies. So there are major concerns that Britain will be heading into an unemployment record that we haven't seen for several decades. And even though there are government measures that can put a plaster on the wound is still deep and will take many years to recover.
Well, we'll see how that goes. And I'm sure you have more details for us later in the day. Thank you, Juliana.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, we draw the curtain on today's edition of the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago.